$8,349 surplus. So there was a lot of pencil sharpening going on, and Alderman Wesley held us to it until we got it where it made sense. So just to tell you briefly, we did increase the revenue for overweight permit fees, for police fines, for telephone and sales taxes, and for miscellaneous revenue. There's a decrease in the red light camera revenue and a corresponding decrease in their expenditures. This is really because the county has not yet given permission for this program, and it's unlikely to be in place for a full fiscal year. So the police chief came up with a better number for us to use so that we're not overstating revenues. Finally, we've got that transfer from the motor fuel tax fund that's going to be used to defray part of the street department salary expense. So after we make those revenue enhancements, we end up with a deficit that's more than cut in half. And then we get to the expenditure decreases. There were some cuts in education and training and conference expenses, copy supplies. The interns from the community development department were eliminated. The council made a commitment to reduce legal fees by $50,000. In the finance department, I think we did copy supplies and education and training, reduced our uniform expense. Police department had a number of items that they reduced or eliminated. City services department eliminated quite a few items. You'll see the details there in administration, streets, and in storm sewer maintenance. And the police department dropped off those CAD devices, those CAD monitors, out of equipment replacement, so we didn't need to make as large of a transfer from the general fund to equipment replacement. And I think the $8,000 for information technology was the server, which is actually coming out of the current fiscal year, so we didn't need it in next year's budget. The final item was to establish the parity for the non-union employees with the union in terms of percentage increase. That was a $12,000 adjustment the other way, but we end up overall with a surplus of $18,349, and the general fund budget ends up, the fund balance ends up a little higher than it was at the end of last year. And I can show you that on the next slide if there are no questions here. But I wanted to give you, we've always made a habit of giving you every change from the initial documents. Now, I have not given you revised copies for your final book, because this is a lot of paper, a lot of copying, and we don't do that lightly. So if this is going to be the general fund budget that gets approved, I'll have the copies for you before the next meeting. Okay.
Yes, my compliments. I mean, to go from 473,000 deficit to 18,000 positive is fantastic. But there's two areas I'd like to double check on, because you mentioned before this was the first visible budget we had without hiding anything. The transfer from the motor fuel tax fund to cover portion of street division salaries, are we going to miss out with $230,000 of fixing streets to do that? Where does that money normally go that we're transferring to the streets salaries?
All we've done is transfer from one pile to the other pile, basically. To utilize MFT funds for streets is a administrative burden. The MFT reporting procedures are quite extensive. In fact, we saw the tail end of them tonight on the 2006 roadway project. By moving the streets, or the MFT for streets, into the general fund, we're then able to transfer funds back into street. We're basically just transferring from one to the other. We're not stealing away from the street, from MFT for streets. Maybe even Maggie can help me a little bit better explain this, because I'm not doing a very good job.
Okay. Well, I think there's two portions here. First of all, he's right. The street programs are going on, and they're not being impaired in any way. But we have found, especially tonight when you saw those two MFT resolutions, the burden of paperwork with motor fuel tax and with IDOT is incredible. And they're so far behind in doing the audits that we often find that they can't track what was done with motor fuel tax funds, and they come in and they will come in and say to us, give us all the records for the last 5 years. Well, you know, the roadway projects in Wooddale tend to be over $1 million. Sometimes they're over 2. And the IDOT has rules and regulations about the dimensions of the street and the configuration of the street. And so we might take $330,000 out of motor fuel tax and say we're applying it to a roadway project. Well, that's not the only hoop we have to jump through. Gary has to prepare all these resolutions and paperwork to prove that the 330 plus the other $1.5 million was spent on a legitimate expenditure for IDOT. It's much easier to show them payroll records. Much easier to say, we have so many people in the street department and we're using $230,000 to pay for their payroll. Real simple to give them the documents. So I guess we're making it easy on ourselves. The other thing, in the last few years, the city's been using motor fuel tax monies to pay for the leases on several vehicles. Well, now those leases are going to be paid off. So we're freeing funds again. So this was a suggestion made by Mr. Holm to fix part of this general fund budget, but also not harm any other programs.
So we're switching funds from one budget to another, but we're not letting anything else be deficient.
No, and in fact, if you'll just...
Okay, no, that's okay. If that's what you say, I take your word for it. There's one other question, a quick one. Decrease storm sewer maintenance and storm sewer maintenance division. Now, we just heard that the extra employees are going to be working on the sewer and the camera and everything else. How can we decrease storm sewer maintenance? That's taken away from the public, not giving them anything extra.
Actually, it's still a net increase. It's just a net increase of less than what we had originally proposed, given the budget constraints. So we are still doing a net increase in storm sewer maintenance, just $10,000 less than we had first proposed.
Thank you.
You know, I continue to agree with Alderman Shockey on the topic of the motor fuel tax fund and moving that $230,000. I don't like it. And I am looking at the motor fuel tax fund, and it is more than just redoing roads. We're looking at, we're able to use that money for equipment lease, correct, Mr. Holm? Equipment lease?
In recent years now, actually starting last year, council had moved away from utilizing equipment leases under MFT just because of the cost premium.
Right, so we could go back there and do that again if we desired, and then we don't have to pay up front for the whole cost, correct?
What?
Like the 5-year lease if we want to go back to that.
Correct. And just to recall, though, that you basically were paying a 20% premium to do that.
Oh, overall though, right? Spread out over the 5 years.
Correct.
And then also, there are other uses. There's, we can go back to, well, the electric utilities. There's just a few different ways to spend this money and things that we need. So I'm not interested in going back and starting to change how we've been doing it. Thank you.
Jeff?
Yeah, this was put in there because this was an item that we discussed at the last committee, and council's direction, the vote was to do it. So, I mean, if we want to reconsider it, we can reconsider it, but the vote was to go ahead and do this.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I just want to follow up with Gary's thing. Keep in mind, when we lease vehicles, we are paying more back in interest of the money that we borrow. Mm-hmm. So the reason why we went away from that part, if I'm mistaken, several years ago, is that we don't have to pay back as much interest, basically. So we pay almost a year of interest. Say we got a lease for 5 years, we actually leasing it for 6 years. So, I mean, something to bring up again, I guess. Can I?
Maggie, if we don't transfer the MFT funds, so then we would go back to
A deficit.
$212,000 deficit. And
Exactly.
That's what our budget would be then?
That's correct, Alderman Knipe.
Alderman Johnson. Mayor Johnson.
Thanks, Mayor. Yeah. On the subject of additional revenue, last meeting I brought up, and I think staff has now confirmed that Timber Trail owes us $30,000. Is that in the figures? And also, Wooddale Station owes us $50,000 or some amount.
There is going to be a complete update in your packets tomorrow. Feel more comfortable if we just wait until tomorrow for the update.
Very good.
Okay. Any other discussions? Obviously, some people raised some concern about this mill fuel tax and NFT fund. My concern is, I'll tell you, if you want to pass the deficit 200 and whatever figures, you got the right to do that, guys. But then, you know what? Then we're going to go back and we're going to visit some other projects that's on the books to go forward. And I will definitely propose every project that we passed already with the train, station, everything else. I'll start cutting there too. Okay? So if that's the way you guys want to do it that way, then let's go back and do it then. But I'll tell you one thing, some of the major projects are definitely going to be cut then. Because I'll tell you one thing, staff, with our meeting on Tuesday, when I sat down with every department head, we went back and I told them that I would not pass the deficit of what we had up there. And I didn't think this council wanted to pass a deficit of $465,000 or $473,000. These departments went back and sharpened their pencils and came back again and sharpened their pencil. And I told them, no, go back and sharpen them. They done an excellent job, and I commend my department heads by doing the cut. But if you guys want to go back and revisit that, knowing that we already made that decision, that's fine. Then bring it back up. But then I'm going to start in with all the other projects. Thank you.
Maggie, I'm looking at this. We're really not decreasing anything in this motor fuel tax fund, right? Because I see like streetlight maintenance, we're up to 35,000 where we were less the year before.
That's correct. All the things that need, what you'll notice is different is, look across the line that says transfers to capital projects fund. Those transfers don't need to be made anymore because the non-home rule sales tax is now going to capital projects, okay? So you'll see that we had, in this current year, 221,000. The year before that, 470. The year before that, 190. Before that, 300. We're talking about 230. Going, I mean, Gary, this is what you wanted me to explain, right? We're not trying to play a shell game here. We're just saying that the motor fuel tax transfer isn't needed to handle the roadway projects that are in capital projects.
Right.
So it becomes available to do several things. Also, we've made the point about the leases. If you look at the detail page for the leases, I think 3 of them are in their 4th year of the 5th 5-year lease.
Right, they're going down.
And so they're going down. So again, these MFT monies are easy, and I was not trying to be facetious about the paperwork. This is a nightmare to try to get MFT paperwork submitted and approved by IDOT, and so if it's easier to show them payroll records than to show them an entire street project, it's the same amount of dollars, it's just a little cleaner.
Right, so all I'm trying to say is that we're not decreasing any of these items here, actually.
No.
Most of them have increased, so it's not, you know, I seem to get the feeling that Alderman Winger was thinking we're decreasing some of these services, and we're not. Right? Okay.
Christine Winger.
Ms. Powers, can you refresh my memory on what or Mr. Holm, on the street cleaning and where we're now reflecting that, or why that one is dropped off on this fund?
Street sweeping. It's road and bridge, I believe, was where we take that out of. And that's not an MFT eligible expense. So that,
Well, why did we have it in 05 and 06?
you had a couple of them in 05, 06 that were not MFT eligible. That's why they were then changed in 06, 07 and going forward.
Okay, moved on.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. There was more than street sweeping. There was some other ones too there that you see went to zero. They got transferred over to road and bridge because they were not eligible MFT expenditures.
Okay, thank you.
So do you want to visit motor fuel tax, or we leave it as is and have them go to print, or whatever they got to do with it? This is a chance, guys. If you want to revisit it, that's fine. We just thought it was a lot easier to do it that way, but I'm open. It's a city council budget. It ain't my budget. It ain't the city's, staff's budget. It's the council's final decision. So let's try come senses and get this thing wrapped up here. Mr. Coles.
Maggie, is this the end of all the funds and the book itself?
Yes, sir. But you'll get updated general fund.
We'll get updated on the sheets that we have to have updated?
Yes.
And that would be, then the budget would be done, right?
Right. Well, I didn't get to my last slide, which summarizes all of them. Okay. But yes, you have a copy of that as well in this
That means
that I gave you.
that everything is just about done except for revisions, right?
Yes.
Well, then, why are we keep arguing about the same thing over and over about the $230,000? It's been transferred into that, and that's it. Let's vote on it.
Mr. Johnson.
Actually, you already did vote on it. You made that decision last finance meeting. One of the things we've talked about is trying to make our meetings shorter. You already made that decision, and any discussion on it is improper unless somebody does a motion to reconsider.
Okay. Well, that answers. I knew there was a reason why we have you at these committee meetings,
Wrap it
Mayor.
up, Maggie, and say good night.
Okay, so are we going to direct staff go ahead and get this all together and present us with the? Oh, one more. Go ahead. Megan.
Of the slides, and it really is just to recap. The only thing it's missing is the special service area fund, but these are all of the budgets that we've reviewed with you, the total revenues, the total expenditures, whether they're in a surplus or deficit position, and what the estimated ending fund balances are. You'll notice, first of all funds end up with a positive fund balance. We talked with you about the water and sewer fund having a deficit, but it's due to depreciation rather than to any other expenditure. In fact, depreciation is a little higher than that. So the fund is balanced, but we will be coming back to you with a water and sewer rate study sometime soon, because that's not going to last. And we are still getting information from the DuPage Water Commission about the new rates based on Chicago's increases. So those might result in some kind of a budget amendment of the 08-09 budget. I don't think we're going to have anything official from them before April 30th. And we have already put some increases in for what the city pays the DuPage Water Commission. We've already increased that rate. So we'll know more when they advise us formally. But I think everything else we've gone through carefully. We've looked at our projections for revenues. We've looked at past history. Everybody has looked at their expenditures at least 3 times, if not more, gone through, and each time, those numbers became a little more refined. So it's a budget that accomplishes quite a lot in terms of service, and pays all the bills.
Any other questions on this budget?
What's the schedule for, we approve it next committee or next council or what?
I think the schedule would be, we'll give you the final revised general fund for your books at the next committee on the 27th. And then at that time, the committee would approve it to go to the full council in April.
Then it goes public hearing. Do we vote like the first week of April or the first council meeting of April?
Yes, that's normally how it's done, and we need to have this book ready for public inspection. And it has to be available for a couple of weeks to the public, so that's why
10 days, right?
Chairman Wesley did ask us to try to get this wrapped up tonight so that we can, double check all the numbers, make sure the copies are fine, and then put the books together for you and for the public.
It's got to be out to the public for at least 10 to 15 days prior to passing. So that's why it kind of says, you know, the numbers, let's face it, we just went through it all. I mean, the numbers ain't going to change. I mean, I think it was a good budget. You know, I think the department heads did what I asked them to do, go back and cut. I think it was a legit budget with the you know, the economy being so tight. You know, but I mean, it's only my opinion. But keep in mind, this is just not my budget. This is the whole council's budget to make the final decision. Mr. Coles.
I'd like to thank you, Maggie, and her help that did the budget. And also, I'd like to congratulate Wesley for sticking to it. All right?
I don't need any congratulations. Let's get it over.
See, I'm not that bad with it. See, even though.
So, Maggie, I think anyone else have any directions for staff, or we're going to direct staff, go ahead and get it together and present it to us, or give us a final.
Okay.
Thank you. Jeff?
One other thing, I'd just like to thank the council and especially Alderman Wesley, Chairman Wesley, for all the help he provided with the budget this year. Was actually the smoothest budget since I've been here, so congratulations to the council, as well as staff's hard work.
Okay. Anyone else? Okay, items for future meeting, budget 2008-2009, water rate billing analysis, business license, code revise. Anything else? Nope. I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. Thanks.